in space, let me tell you something about myself. I'm a fan of sci-fi. Yeah, I know, I hide it so well. And over the years, I have seen spaceships depicted in so many ways. But there's one look I really like that I've never tried to do. I think I first saw it in the movie Apollo 13, and then in the found footage story Europa Report. But it wasn't until For All Mankind that I realised what I was looking at. It's this light blooming off parts of the spacecraft, plus almost handheld, plus long lens style, that feels very real. So I thought, let's figure out how to do it. This video is slightly different. I'm going to try not to be prescriptive. I will talk you through all my settings, and I've broken down my workflow into the following chapters: camera movement, bloom, background and lens defects. Each one presented a different challenge, and I'll discuss both my end result and failed assumptions, and hopefully share some tips along the way too. I'm using After Effects Beta, as this provides shadows for parallel lights. Hopefully by the time you're watching this, After Effects will have this included in the standard release. So here's a comp, and I have a spaceship model I've put together. Fun fact, my wife finally watched Babylon 5 with me and said, "Oh, that's why you always make spaceships look like that." I've made a null object and made it 3D and parented the model to it. Parenting means it's just easy to adjust the model's position, so I can add a 2.5D solid as a 3D proxy if I need to. And generally I find it good practice. And I'm just going to keyframe it from -10,000 to +10,000 on the x-axis. And so next I'll make a camera. I want to simulate a long lens, so instead of using the default 50mm preset, I'm going to use the 80mm. I did want to use the 135 camera, but the values that generated left everything extreme. 80mm should give me enough of a telephoto look, and that set the zoom to be 1500. If I adjust this, notice how the angle of view and focal length are changing. I don't want depth of field. I find that for long shots like this, it tends to make things look toy-sized. But because I'm using the advanced 3D renderer, a lot of the camera options are greyed out anyway. So let's expand the camera properties on the timeline and link its point of interest to the spaceship null. Actually, no. Let's duplicate the spaceship null and call it camera null. Delete its position keyframes and make its parent spaceship null. That gives us more flexibility. Then, on the point of interest for the camera, use the pick whip to link to the camera null. You'll get an error, so expand the expression we just created and add dot to world brackets square brackets 0, 0, 0 close squares close regular brackets. The capital W is important. This means I can move the camera's view independently of the spacecraft's position, but it will stay with the spacecraft most of the time. And I'll move the camera back a bit. Now that I'm seeing the full animation, the spacecraft does not like it's moving very fast. So I'll scale it down and I'll really increase the distance as it's moving on the x-axis. -50,000 to +50,000. When you see long lens footage, quite often there's shaking as the slightest nudge seems magnified. And my first thought was, can I take some real-world long lens footage and use the camera tracker on it? And yeah, I was able to take some real footage and track it, but one hurdle was finding footage that matched my intention. And then, when I added the tracking moves to the camera, it ended up making the spacecraft look like it was on wires. So that idea was a bust. But then I remembered Jarle's handheld presets. Jarle Leopold is a Norwegian filmmaker, editor and motion graphics artist. For over a decade he's been providing resources to others to make their videos better. So much so that during the making of Deadpool, the editorial team reached out to Jarle to ask for help updating his handheld camera presets. They are position and rotation keyframes captured from real footage. And then Jarle provided them for everyone, for free. Once installed, if I search for handheld and then double click the preset, it adds a solid to the timeline. As you can see from the transform properties, it's scaled up and rotates slightly. But this is in a 2D solid, and we need to adapt it for 3D. On the camera's position property, hold Alt and click on the stopwatch, and type x equals value, square brackets 0, plus 960 minus, and pick whip the x position of the handheld solid, semicolon, new line, y equals value squares 1 plus 540 minus, and pick whip the y position, semicolon, new line, z equals value squares 2, semicolon, squares x, y, z, close squares. So take the x value and accounting for the original HD measurements of the camera shake, the 960, half of an HD comps width, add these position changes to x, and then do the same for y and leave z alone. Then recombine into an array for the position property. Using this expression on just the camera works quite well, and on just the null position also works. But I think using it on both the camera position and the null's position gets us that I'm holding a camera on a cheap tripod while on my own spacecraft look that I was hoping for. Now, as the aspect of the spacecraft changes as it gets closer, I also wanted to do a crash zoom. I first noticed it in Battlestar Galactica and always thought it looked cool. And seeing as there's just the one camera property we can adjust, let's do it. It's easy enough to set a couple of keyframes, and I'll set a layer marker too so I can spot when it happens easily. I'll then add a couple of keyframes around here into the null's position, almost like as I manually adjust the zoom I lose the subject. And incidentally, adding that zoom is going to create such a headache for me in the next section. But just before that, I'll go to near the end of the timeline, copy my zoom keyframes and paste them in here. Then right click and choose time reverse keyframes. To get this light blooming look, we're going to use a trick of After Effects to compensate for the inability to add effects directly to a 3D model. But first we need our sun. Layer, new light. Make it a parallel light, and being in a beta, I can have it cast shadows, the harsh sort you'd expect in a place without atmosphere to scatter the light. And now I'm going to set its intensity to 200%. This is going to make the bright areas very bright. And to make things easier, I'm going to alt click on the point of interest stopwatch and type square brackets 0, 540, 0. So no matter where I move the light's position, it will always point directly to the center of the animation. And I want it so we can see some shadows, but unfortunately all my shiny metal is now black. Almost like I planned that. And I'm going to come back to that in the background section, so yeah, I definitely planned that. Getting back to that bloom, I need to create a new solid. And I've called it Bloom. And then I'll go to Effect, Channel, Calculations. The Calculations effect is sort of like its own pre-comp, as you can combine two layers into one. And so we can take our 3D model, set its opacity to 100%, and change the blending mode to copy. And now we have a duplicate of our model, but one we can apply effects to. So next I'll go to Effect, Keying, Extract. I'm going to use this as a Luma key, but seeing as Luma key is considered obsolete, I'll use this. I'll solo the layer so we don't see the original model, then crank up the black point, so we only get the lightest parts left. And then I'll go to Effect, Blur and Sharpen, Gaussian Blur, and crank this up to somewhere between 50 and 75. I'm using Gaussian Blur or Gaussian Blur because it keeps the opacity more rather than say fast box blur. And when I unsolo it and set the layer to screen, this is the look I was going for. To be honest, I could have used the glow effect instead, but in this comparison, I think you see it's a softer edge with Gaussian blur, less pixelatedly, maybe. I decided to avoid using my previous recommended method of VC Orb. While I love this free effect from Video Copilot, I wanted to try out the environment lights, and as it's purely a background effect, it shouldn't cause any conflicts with the GPU. But just setting up an HD comp didn't work. I used CC ball action on the smaller size and no speed, and got a pretty cool starfield, as you'd expect. But dropping this into the main comp with CC environment made the stars really big. After dozens of different attempts, including using CC Particle World, Particle Systems 2, and using 2.5D solids of stars arranged in the distance, I ended up returning to my original idea, but with a massive 10,000 pixel by 5,000 pixel pre-comp of the stars. So, dropping this pre-comp into the main comp, and then making a separate 2D solid, and going to Effect, Perspective, CC Environment, and then point it to the stars pre-comp, and we get this. But that old metal specular issue has really been highlighted now. The shiny parts are completely black. And this is where I made another misstep. At first I tried adding an environment light which used the stars, but that didn't help. Maybe a lighter version of the stars just for the environment light? Well, that just washed out the shadows. And ambient light did the same. So in the end, I went back into Photoshop and Blender and re-exported my model with a much less extreme specular map. Incidentally, I'm currently in the planning stages for a video on how to optimize or fix 3D models for After Effects. Feel free to post in the comments if you have any questions you'd like answered. So that's the stars sorted, and I thought it would be neat to add something more dynamic, which gives me the chance to share this awesome website from Jonas Wagner. Neon Flames lets you draw your perfect spacey nebula in multiple colours, and then you can download it. So I did that and brought it into my comp, and then expanded on the timeline and turned off except lights and shadows. I don't want the sun to affect it. And I'll drag it below the CC environment layer, as CC ball action has no background and 3D layers have no blending modes. On the first frame, I'll make it a child of the camera and zero out the position and rotations, and push it right back in Z space, 50,000. And then scale it right up. And then unparent it from the camera by setting the drop down to none. But it's looking a little faint. So I'll add a Gaussian blur and set it to 200. And then let's bring back the original by going to Effect, Channel, CC Composite. With the effects transfer mode set to screen, and so on just one layer we get to add some blurriness as if there's additional interstellar dust, but we still retain the detail. For the nebula it is heading into, I used Boris FX free particle illusion, and when I got a look I liked, I brought this into After Effects, and after it was positioned, you can right click on it and choose time stretch, and set the value to 1000. And to prevent that looking jerky, right click again and choose frame blending pixel motion. Barely on screen, but it does give the slightest movement. Completely improbable, of course. One last thing for the background. The spacecraft is completely separate from it. There's no spill. So I'm going to duplicate my comp. Then in the duplicate, I'll turn off everything but the camera and stars and nebulas. And then I'll bring this into my main comp. And then go to Effect, Channel, set matte. And I'll set the spacecraft as the matte. But invert it. And then I'll go to Effect, Blur and Sharpen, Fastbox Blur, and I'll set the amount to 3. Then I'll duplicate the set matte. Bring it below the blur and uninvert it. So we get an outline of the ship with the brightest areas of the background spilling onto it. And I'll just set the whole pre-comp layer to screen. It barely makes a difference here, but here it is with a bright Earth behind it. So what's left? Oh yeah. The project is linked in the description, and you don't have to pay for it. The links are pay what you want, although massive thanks to Bradley J. Campbell who paid for my Planetary Rings project. Thank you for supporting me. It's ironic, but as movie makers seek to remove imperfections in actually shot footage, I'm here trying to add them back in to help make this shot look real. I've already got a tutorial and download for quick cheats that help you. Things like adding vignette and some noise and a Lumetri color preset. But there's another trick I thought we could add. I've brought the comp into another comp. I dragged it onto this button, which makes a new comp the same size and resolution, but also adds the original as a layer. I've done this because I'm going to duplicate it as a layer and rename the duplicate to LumaMatte. And I'm going to go to Effect, Blur and Sharpen, Fastbox Blur, and set the blur to 100. Unlike when I'm using Gaussian blur, this time I want to lose all the core details, in this case the stars, but I do want the bright parts to be a bit brighter. So next I'll add a levels effect from color correction and drag the input white petal down to about halfway. So as you'll have guessed from the layer name, I'm going to use this as a LumaMatte for a lens dirt image. Searching on a royalty-free website like Pexels, or the free section of Adobe Stock, gets me some examples. So I'll add this to the comp, and then I'll go to Effect, Blur and Sharpen, Camera Lens Blur, and set the amount to 20, so we get some nice hexagon bokehs. And then set the layer to use our LumaMatte pre-comp as a LumaMatte. So now the brightest parts of our animation will light up the dirt on the lens. But it's a bit too obvious. So I went back to the blur effects and first I added a radial blur. Then a trick I picked up a while back. Let's add an optics compensation effect from Effects Distortion. That just sort of stretches the edges. And I've done this so I can add a little fake chromatic aberration. I've used plugin everything's free QCR3 for this. But I'll also duplicate the dirt image and remove the LumaMatte, and I'll delete everything but the camera lens blur. And then I'll add a circular mask to it, and I'll expand the mask properties on the timeline. Tapping MM is the quick way to do this. I'll set a mask to subtract and the feather to a massive 400 pixels, and the expansion to half that. I'll then drop the layer's opacity to 50%, so I create this frosting around the edges look, as if the lens cap is not fully blocking all the light. And that's it. Each stage may seem a little heavy-handed, but I think by the time they're all combined it elevates the shot. Here's an example with no shake, bloom, colour correction or lens tricks. I know which I prefer, but I may be wrong. I think the basic example is what you could get directly out of a 3D program before post-production effects. What I've spent the time in this video doing could equally be applied to 3D renders. It's just now we can do this directly in AE. On another note, do you like this format? Normally I focus more on specific tricks or ideas, but this one was more about combining lots of little tricks to get the final result. Let me know in the comments, and thanks for watching.